Thank you very much. Actually, thank you very much for the invitation. Actually, really love to be here with you. Very short introduction of myself. My name is Antonio Fiori. I am a professor at the University of Bologna. Actually, there are many people who consider the University of Bologna to be the oldest university in the world, having been established in 1088. But nobody knows if this is actually true or not. But eventually, those who work there really like to think that this is a real something that is really that actually really happened at that time. In any case, actually, I devoted my whole life to the study of the Korean Peninsula. The first time I came to Korea was 1997, and since actually I've never left Korea, meaning I have never given up studying the Korean Peninsula, and I've always been pretty much intrigued by inter-Korean relations. And on top of that, actually, I started to be pretty much interested in North Korean affairs from both domestic and foreign policy point of view. That is actually what I do. I basically tend to study the peninsula, so I'm very, very interested in inter-Korean relations. I have published widely on inter-Korean relations, basically from two different angles, if I can say, theoretically speaking, actually, from the historical point of view and from the political point of view. And of course, actually, I tend to intertwine. I tend to look at both dimensions because these are eventually for me pretty much important. Now, when it comes to North Korea, which is actually what we're going to talk about today, I've always found the Western approach and significantly the Italian approach pretty much unacceptable. I am the only one studying North Korea in Italy, or probably the only one doing that from a scientific point of view. And this is actually what I would like to specify. From the scientific point of view, actually, North Korea is something that it is really, really difficult to study for several reasons, actually, because, because of the regime, because of the history of the regime, because of how actually the regime behaved, because, Kim Il-sung is not Kim Jong-un. I mean, characters are pretty much different, and eventually we need to pay attention to the different characters. We need to pay attention to the different strategies that every leader gives implementation to. Now, when it comes to the West, and as I was saying, significantly to Italy, what it is absolutely unacceptable is the fact that everybody looks at North Korea from a journalistic point of view, with a journalistic attitude, and this is eventually what I do not like. They want actually people to understand the country as if it really was the hermit kingdom everybody talks about, and if the regime was completely unpredictable and absolutely aggressive and violent and brutal. And I'm not saying this is not correct, but eventually this should be seen from a scientific point of view. In order to reinforce my position, if I can, I would like to give you an example of what I'm saying. In 2017, actually, when Chan Son-taek was executed, everybody, actually, many specialists, including me, were trying to look at that specific event from a scientific point of view. So why actually Chan Son-taek was killed? Who was Chan Son-taek? What Chan Son-taek actually represented for the regime? What kind of alliances eventually could there be between Chan Son-taek and the Chinese leadership in the PRC? All these questions which were absolutely not easy to give an answer to. And instead of looking at that from these kind of perspective, what many journalists did, what the majority of journalists actually did in the West, was depicting Chan Son-tek as being killed by several dogs, as eventually as many in many in China actually wanted us to believe, which was actually not true. It was something, totally fabricated, invented by, a Chinese website. But actually, this is what we like to believe about the North Korean regime from a Western point of view. And this is absolutely not scientific. So again, I actually tend to do, a scientific kind of examination of North Korea. On top of that, actually, what I always tend to do is trying to understand what is the position of the different South Korean administrations when it comes to North Korea. And I've published a book on that, actually, an edited book, but eventually that was a very important one, because actually, from the theoretical point of view, the question was how do progressive administrations in South Korea behave towards North Korea, and how conservatives actually do. And we basically tended to understand the two different positions. And actually, this was a very, very important kind of examination, a very important kind of analysis, because actually what we did discover was that basically when it comes to domestic kind of attitude, actually, progressive and conservatives in South Korea sometimes tend to have the same position, okay, when it comes to economics, for example, or when it comes to different policies that eventually are introduced, are adopted to help or support youngsters. When it comes to North Korea and to the approach that eventually South Korea has to North Korea, I mean, these can be very, very different. Moon Jae-in is not Im Yong-bak. Kim Yong-bak is actually not Kim Dae-jung. And of course, Yoon Suk-yeol is completely different. But there are some contacts between progressives and some contacts between actually conservatives. And what we aimed at doing was trying to find these recurrent points. And, eventually this is something I'm pretty interested in. Nowadays, actually, what I'm doing, and, I'm having a lot of fun in doing that, is actually studying the so-called North Korea's third world diplomacy. That is actually something that North Korea started at doing in the late 50s, and it was kind of really successful in the 70s. What I'm talking about is actually the fact that North Korea became a very, very important protagonist, very important actor by actually linking to other countries in the so-called third world. And I am very, very interested in actually the policy that North Korea started by being involved in that famous group of nations that actually was labeled as the non-aligned movement. And so actually what I'm doing is eventually trying to understand, what were the contact points between North Korea and non-aligned movements. And the more I study this kind of topic, the more I convince myself that, there were only few contact points, but actually for the regime itself, aligning with the non-aligned movement actually was pretty much important in order to gain legitimacy. And actually, the leadership actually wanted to gain legitimacy in order to overcome South Korea. And, this is kind of really important, because actually it's like, having a race. Okay, it's like a competition between North Korea and South Korea. But at that time, actually, North Korea, the only objective Pyongyang had was kind of depicting itself as being more mature than South Korea. It was not the case, but actually, this was the image Kim Il Sung wanted to give to the external world. And on top of that, actually, by aligning with these kind of third world nations, actually, North Koreans wanted to kind of making the image of Kim Il Sung being accepted, by as many countries as they could. Okay, and this is actually what I'm very interested in. A couple of more things, actually, if you allow me, I would like to add. The first is, going back to the first part of what I was saying. Actually, what is really puzzling is that kind of people in Italy are not really interested in North Korea. Actually, basically what Italians say about Kim Jong Un is that he's mad. That's all. Point. Full stop. Period. Actually, nothing else. He is mad. He must be stopped. This is a regime that eventually takes into consideration the possibility of using nuclear weapons, and this is unacceptable. And these people are unpredictable, and these kind of things, which I really find kind of nonsensical. These kind of things actually should be understood, and eventually they ask for more. They want to understand more about North Korea. They want to understand more about these dictatorial kind of regime. For them, actually, the fact that Kim Jong Un is a brutal dictator is not eventually enough. They want to understand why, how, and how we did get to this kind of position, and they want to understand what's the divide between South Korea and North Korea? Why actually unification is kind of really impossible at this time? I mean, they need to understand. So students are really, really interested in it. The general public is not kind of really interested in understanding more about North Korea. So if I want, actually, I can stop here and eventually waiting for questions.
Okay, thank you for your interesting lecture on the point Italian perspective on North Korea, and then Western media's sensational report method or tendency, and how why it's so hard for researchers and European researchers to study North Korea. Okay, my question is actually, to elaborate your point. And then most of all, you mentioned again and again the to approach North Korea's politics and then economy and then society, and at the same time human rights issues are not very well, directed. And then especially the media, so-called, Western media, you said they have some wrong method or wrong the directions to approach North Korean affairs. Why so? And then can you elaborate how wrong the North Korean media report from the Western perspective in the 2024?
Yeah, that's sure. Absolutely. Thank you very much for the question, actually. Now, don't get me wrong. Again, this is kind of really important. The first message I would like to convey is not to get me wrong, because actually I'm not, of course, defending the regime. I'm not absolutely saying that the regime, needs to be defended. Of course, we're talking about a dictatorship. Of course, we're talking about a brutal regime. Of course, we are talking about a dictator, which is eventually leading the country. Okay, it's not about that. What I'm telling you is basically the fact that Western media tend to sensationalize everything. about North Korea. Just because actually you can't go, you're a journalist, eventually you can't have any access to North Korea, right? So you can't go there, you can't actually make interviews, you can't ask for sources, you don't have any access to the country. So actually, what I'm telling you is basically the fact that when Western media have to do with North Korea, the tendency is always to sensationalize without actually trying to understand what's there behind actually every behavior of the regime, every behavior of Kim Jong-un and the leadership. It's like, we don't understand why, but it's okay. I mean, it's like, it has a despicable kind of attitude, but we do not want to understand why this is so. Okay. We actually are not interested in trying to understand that eventually, the fact that North Korea has this kind of attitude, it's because it has to have a defensive posture. Okay, this is actually in the mind of the regime. I'm weak. This is my position as an analyst. For example, the North Korean regime is weak, and of course, actually, it has to defend itself because of its intrinsic weakness. Okay, we don't actually take that into account. What Western media tend to do is that, oh, they are so arrogant that eventually they are telling us that they could eventually put a warhead on a rocket and actually hit the American territory. Okay, and so actually, what we tend to say is that how can you eventually think that? I mean, you can't do that just because that is the United States of America, and if only you take that into consideration, I mean, of course, you must be irrational. Okay, this is actually one of the terms that is most used in the West. The North Korean regime is irrational. So I don't think it's irrational. I wrote actually two books in order to make people understand how rational the regime is. It's you must be actually rational to eventually work for like 7 decades on the development of the nuclear program. You must be pretty rational to do that because at this point actually they have so many warheads that eventually, I mean, threatening the North Korean territory has become pretty impossible or very hard actually. So you must be rational to do that. Nowadays, actually, working with the Russian Federation and another dictator like Putin, actually, it's a very rational kind of choice.
Yeah, I mean, my next question is just like what you said. What's your take on this? North Korea and Russia rapprochement in a military cooperation and then comprehensive strategic relationship treaty. What's your take on it?
What I was saying is that actually there were no important relations between Moscow and Pyongyang. Now, the war has changed everything. Paradoxically, let me tell you that the war in Ukraine has changed everything for both Koreas, not only for North Korea. Let me tell you something. For North Korea, actually, the war has been pretty important. Not only because actually, the link, actually, the economic link between North Korea and Russia has been developing. Okay, and it has become very important and profitable for North Korea. Okay, not only because of that. What I am looking at nowadays is especially the diplomatic shield that actually North Korea has kind of obtained. Okay, you know well that actually whenever there were resolutions and the introduction of sanctions, actually China and Russia, both of them, voted in a positive way, right? I'm not saying that actually those votes were efficient, because we all know that China voted at the UNSC, and then actually on the other hand they said it's okay, we can overcome these whenever we want. But nowadays actually what they are doing is kind of creating a shield around North Korea. That is, whenever the US is asking at the UNSC to introduce more sanctions against North Korea. Nowadays, China and Russia, are saying, no way, we are vetoing that possibility. And this makes sense for North Korea at the diplomatic level. It makes a lot of sense. And on top of that, this kind of behavior China and Russia are having is actually pretty much important to it must be taken into consideration, because of the buying time kind of approach North Korea has always had. We do not know. We don't really know actually what North Korea is doing nowadays, right? Improving its nuclear arsenal, it's improving its nuclear weapons, whatever. But we don't know. We do absolutely not know what North Korea is doing by now. From the other point of view, actually, I'm really, I really need to admit that eventually Trump was successful in order to engage Kim Jong Un at a very precise moment. But actually, Trump was not successful in doing anything else. What actually I do tend to believe is that, especially Singapore, the Singapore meeting was a showcase, nothing else for both of them. But actually, what was important for Kim Jong Un was kind of being legitimized by the same presence, the same invitation of Trump. And nowadays, actually, what Biden eventually attempted at doing, kind of, we can talk, all right? I mean, he completely changed his position from the beginning of his
Good.
term. At the beginning of his term, actually, he didn't want to talk to North
Oh,
Koreans. Nowadays, he's trying to, he has tried actually to find the possibility to talk to North Korea. But Kim Jong Un nowadays has no interest at all.
okay, okay. Well, then it's another hypothetical question for you. You mentioned Donald Trump, and then nobody can escape from the Donald Trump
Oh
question these
yeah.
days. Yeah, and then we of course Kamala Harris and Democratic Party, the presidential candidate officially right now she's competing with Donald Trump in the very competitive way. But Donald Trump presidency, number two. If you expect, we think that the Donald Trump is going to have another term, and then what's going to happen to U.S. and North Korea relationship? You mentioned about Singapore, and then you mentioned probably Hanoi, and then probably somewhere probably where the Rome or Bologna.
I don't know if I have a good recipe for that, but actually, I've always been pretty sure of one thing. If you want to engage North Korea, the only possibility we have is dialogue. That's the only possibility, re-engagement. If we actually tend to, create some kind of peaceful, engagement, if we tend to give some kind of stability, if actually we do start from, making efforts toward the possibility of creating a peace regime, not a peace treaty, a peace regime, which is much more precise, and it takes a lot of efforts more than a simple peace treaty. A peace regime is everything. Okay, we need to establish a dialogue with North Korea. And actually, that's why I really appreciated what Trump did with Kim Jong Un. I didn't have the same idea. I am sure that something went wrong. I am sure that actually Trump had to make a lot of efforts more, especially in Hanoi, when actually he was suggested, he was asked by Kim Jong Un to eventually lift 11 sanctions that have more impact on the population. Okay, not on the regime. They were absolutely useless for the regime. And on top of that, actually, we should take into account again, what's the need of actually, adopting more and more sanctions against the regime. I mean, this is something we should really take care of. Because in the
Okay.
case of North Korea,
All
actually, the
right.
regime is not having any kind of problems because of sanctions. But again, dialogue.
Okay. Thank you so much. It's
Thanks a
very
lot. Thank you very
yeah,
much.
very lively discussion with you, and I had fun. And always remember Toscana, Italy. And then we will continue to communicate with you on the North Korea and the unification issue.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I will actually invite you to come again to Italy to visit
Oh
my
yeah, I mean, thank
university.
you so much. Okay.
Oh, no
So
worries. It's my pleasure. I thank you very much again.
yeah.